We continue to follow breaking news from overnight. Catholics and people around the world mourning the death of Pope Francis. This morning, you're taking a live look at the Vatican, where you can see hundreds, if not thousands, of people have been pouring into the square to be able to pay their respects. Good morning, I'm Madison Sawyer.
And I'm Carmen Blackwell. Pope Francis was 88 years old, and he was also the first Latin American pontiff who charmed the world with his humble lifestyle and also his concern for the poor. Just yesterday, Pope Francis managed a brief appearance Easter Sunday, blessing thousands in Vatican City. He arrived at St. Peter's Basilica in the Pope Mobile Easter Sunday. From the balcony, he later blessed the thousands of Christians below in a brief but meaningful moment. His message, which was delivered by an archbishop, spoke of the suffering in Gaza and also in Israel, mentioning both the rise in anti-Semitism and of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He again called for a ceasefire and also the release of those hostages. The 88-year-old pontiff died, followed a series of health challenges in recent years, as we've seen play out.
Yeah, and before being elected as Pope in 2013, he actually served as Archbishop of Buenos Aires and was made a cardinal by Pope John Paul II. Now, Tina Kraus has more on his life and also his legacy.
From his first words as Pope,
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera.
Francis displayed a humble style that earned him the nickname the People's Pope, often wearing plain robes and living in a small apartment at the Vatican. Born in Argentina in 1936, Jorge Bergoglio became a priest in 1969 and Archbishop of Buenos Aires in 1998. He earned another nickname there, the Bishop of the Slums. He rode the bus, cooked his own meals, and preached in the poorest neighborhoods. The Pope's humility was visible during his visit to the U.S. in 2015. He rode in a small car and his Pope Mobile while getting around in Washington, D.C., New York, and Philadelphia.
In the land of the free, at the home of the brave.
The Holy Father made history when he addressed Congress and celebrated Mass with hundreds of thousands of people in Philadelphia. The Pope also brought a message to U.S. Catholics to take care of those less fortunate. On the final day of his trip, he met with victims of sex abuse. In 2019, Pope Francis expelled disgraced former U.S. Cardinal Theodore McCarrick after a Vatican investigation found him guilty of sexually abusing children. He was the most high-profile church figure to be defrocked in modern times.
We ask forgiveness for our sins.
The move came just weeks before nearly 200 senior church leaders met for a landmark Vatican summit to prevent clergy sex abuse.
Nei confronti dei bambini.
Despite the clergy abuse scandal, the Pope worked at making the church more welcoming. He launched a worldwide survey on contraception, premarital sex, and homosexuality. The Pope said gay people should not be marginalized and famously asked, "Who am I to judge?" Francis made history in 2023, leading the funeral of his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI. That same year, he celebrated the first decade of his papacy with the release of his first podcast, or Popecast. In an historic interview with CBS's Norah O'Donnell in 2024, the Pope addressed criticisms of his efforts to revisit teachings and traditions of the Church.
One thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past. But quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
Francis, who had part of his lung removed when he was younger, battled a number of health issues in his later years, including hospitalizations for bronchitis. Supporters will forever remember him as a revolutionary pope, crediting him with choosing service and kindness over the power of the papacy. Tina Kraus, CBS News.
So the question is, what happens next now?
So when a pope dies, the Roman Catholic Church then begins a series of elaborate rituals that mark the end of one papacy and then the start of the next. So Cardinal Kevin Farrell has to officially then confirm his death, traditionally by tapping the pontiff's head 3 times with a silver hammer and calling out his name. Then Farrell and 3 assistants decide when the Pope's coffin will be taken into St. Peter's Basilica for public viewing. Mourning rites last about 9 days, with the date of the funeral and burial to be then decided by the cardinals. Then the process of selecting a new pope begins when a conclave is convened between 15 and 20 days after the passing. Conclave can then last up to 13 days.
So if you're not really familiar, a conclave is the process by which Catholic cardinals select the next pope. The participants are sequestered and forbidden from speaking to anyone outside this process, which can take several days. Only cardinals below the age of 80 have a vote, which they cast in the Sistine Chapel. Rounds of voting continue until one candidate receives a 2/3 supermajority. The crowd waiting outside the Vatican is notified that a pope has been elected when the chimney above the Sistine Chapel billows out a white-colored smoke.